Welcome back to Up North at 4. You may recognize the person right here. His name is Danny McKinney, and he's a former WJFWer. He's working on a documentary right now. We'll get to the documentary in a bit, but first, Danny, how are you doing today?
Great, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show today. Really excited to be here.
So a lot of people, we have a lot of loyal viewers of Channel 12, so you might be recognized, probably more facial hair than you had back then. But just tell us about your history with WJFW. When did you work here, and what were your main things that you worked on?
Sure. So I worked at Newswatch 12 back in 2013. I was a journalist. I was an anchor and reporter. I worked on the morning show a little bit, worked with Haley Tempass, and reported on stories around the Northwoods. Some of the more memorable stories I worked on. I did a story on Norma Johnson, who had 38 goldfish. I did a story with Lex Gray. We did a 120-mile run. Basically, Lex traveled with someone named Barb Klinner. She was raising money for Pediatric Cancer Society, and she ran from Weston to Zockow, right outside of Green Bay, 120 miles overnight. And it was just a really enduring story, really grueling. And that was one of the more memorable stories when I was at Newswatch 12, definitely.
Very cool, Danny. Well, let's talk about your documentary a little bit. Tell me what inspired you to make this documentary. We'll watch the trailer in a bit, but let's just start with kind of a genesis of this documentary.
Sure. So this is kind of a culmination of my life story dealing with mental health. I started dealing with this struggle when I was back in high school, middle school time, got diagnosed with depression. And then when I got to college, that's when things really started to kind of spiral down. I was diagnosed after I dropped out of college when I was 23 years old. The doctor said it was schizophrenia, bipolar, or something else. So I was a little unsure of the exact diagnosis at the time. It wouldn't come until I was about 25, 26 years old when I finally realized through doctors and through hospitalization that I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is kind of a combination between schizophrenia and bipolar. It's kind of got the best in both worlds of both of those disorders.
All right, so let's take a look at the trailer for the Danny film.
And 24 times 1 is 24. Good morning, and thanks for tuning in to another Countdown to 60 Seconds. I'm your host, Danny McKinney. Glad you could tune in to another Countdown of 60 Seconds. I'm Danny McKinney. I'm Danny McKinney.
And I'm Danny McKinney.
And good morning, Conestoga. I'm Dan McKinney.
I'm Dan McKinney. We've got a great show for you today, including...
This has been a passion of mine ever since 7th grade, and, since then I like to consider myself a backpack journalist because I love having a hand in all aspects of the production.
I've always loved looking through the lens of the camera, telling stories about people, places, and events. So I became a journalist.
Newswatch 12 Midday starts now.
I'm Dan McKinney. Alongside, he's got 4.9 million barrels of...
And then one day I started hearing voices. I spent 5 days in a room without a window or toilet. This is the real-life story of my descent into madness. Of an Emmy Award-winning journalist. The doctors rescued my mind, but hope saved my life. And sometimes it feels like my mind is a TV.
We seem to be having some technical difficulties.
From the city of brotherly love to the Pacific Northwest, these images that you've seen here on screen have helped set my bipolar mind free. And allowed me to be me.
So Danny, my first thoughts on this trailer is your use of video and sounds that, I don't have this disorder, but I feel like it really kind of puts the viewer into the mind of someone with schizoaffective disorder. Was that your intention with the specific edits you made?
Exactly, Dan. So, I wanted to give the viewers a sense of my descent into madness. And this is kind of a visceral look into, the mind of somebody with schizoaffective disorder. And it's very raw, and it's kind of just a compelling look into, what goes on in my head, and I'm trying to visually tell that story. But ultimately, this is a story of hope. The doctors rescued my mind, the medicine realigned my thinking, but ultimately this is a story of hope, because hope is what saved my life. So this is the message that I'm trying to come across or pass along to people who are struggling with mental health, is that hope is out there, and hope is there for people who want to grasp onto it and pull themselves out of the depths of darkness.
How can people learn more about the Danny film?
They can visit www.thedannyfilm.com, where there's all kinds of information, ways to contact me, and also there's a link to the Kickstarter. We've got a Kickstarter campaign going on right now. We raised about $4,500. Our goal is $7,000, so we're trying to get there. We have about 25 days left in the Kickstarter, so if anyone is interested in helping to fund the film, you can join on to the Kickstarter and help support the film.
Well, I always like seeing former Channel 12ers succeed. So I'm glad you're working on the project. You gave me kind of an early cut of it. It looks great. But I want to make sure that our viewers have a chance to kind of learn just one more thing about you. We see a lot of Channel 12ers come and go. So I just want to know what comes to the top of your mind when you think about the Northwoods and your time living in Rhinelander.
Oh my gosh, Dan, I think it's the people. It's the people that make up the Northwoods that make it so special and beautiful. I mean, I miss the hometown feel of Rhinelander. I knew growing up I always wanted to be a journalist, and I wanted to go to a small town where I walked into the bar and everybody knew my name, and that was certainly the Rhinelander feel. I think back to my days in Rhinelander and the times I spent at Pat's Tavern, and Pam and Dennis there at Pat's Tavern, and Taco Tuesdays, and just the wonderful people there. That always greeted you with a smile and the warmth of a hometown feel. And that's something that you can't find. I haven't found anywhere else. And Rhinelander is just a really special place. And I certainly miss the people the most.
Danny McKinney, former WJFW, on to bigger and better things with his Danny film. You can go to thedannyfilm.com to learn more. Danny McKinney, thanks so much for joining us on Up North at 4.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Dan.